The Existential Crisis Hotline. The Existential Crisis Hotline. The Existential Crisis Hotline. The Existential Crisis Hotline. The Existential Crisis Hotline.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back. Thursday night. I got a few things I want to show you tonight. I want to talk to you about the value of reading. I got some cool examples. There was an article that's making waves right now across the internet from The Atlantic about the decline in reading ability. They're calling it post-literacy. So we're announcing post-literate America now in The Atlantic. So we're going to talk about that. I'll show you some people's reactions and comments to it. I'll give my own perspective. And have some other cool stuff I want to look at. But before we get to that, I saw this really cool post. It's going to blow your mind. Hold on one second. Let me add my, actually, hold on. Let me see, where is it? I don't know if I added my, oh, we got it here. Okay, cool. I wasn't sure if I added my screen properly. What's up, chat? What's up, Owen, Gaitan? I always wanted to, ever since I was a little kid, I always wanted to be one of those guys who was like talking to his chat, you know, like, what's up, chat? What's the chat think? But, you know, I don't think of you as a chat. I think of you as individuals. So I see Owen and Gaitan. You're the only two that exist to me because I don't see anybody else. Okay, but anyway, so check this out. It's the new video from Neo, the robot company, introducing Neo's 25 degrees of freedom. Tendon-driven hands, nearing or surpassing human-level dexterity. Okay, I'm just going to show you the video. What's up, Sandra? I'm going to show you the video. It's pretty cool. Who can name that piece of music? What the fuck are we watching here? What was that about? First of all, if you're making grapes for me, do not take them off the stem. I want to take them off the stem. That's the first thing I'd reprogram this robot to do, is do not take them off the stem. Plus, does it give you the mushy ones? Because I don't like the mushy ones. I don't know what was up with the weird breaking the thing. But then, okay, it can lift 20 pounds. That's pretty cool. But what's up with this next part? What's going on here? That's such a weird shot. What is that about? If you ever need a full zip to a quarter zip or a half zip, if you need your quarter zip to a half zip, this robot's got you covered. Can it unzip my pants is the question. That would be the question. Why aren't they showing the whole robot? Good question. It's just about the hands, Sandra. 9 Symphonies? Is that the name of that piece? Dun, dun, da, 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 da. I can't even remember what it is now. It sounds like Vivaldi? I don't know. I'm probably off. That's a strong finger. Oh, you won't even have to build Legos with your kids anymore. Whoa. That's some weird stuff, man. Pretty crazy. I like this first comment here. You saw that part whenever, let's see, where was it? Right here. Was it that part? Yeah. Where it shows the robot's face, right? I like this comment here. That's the face of a robot that knows it's going to be jerking people off soon. Yeah. That's pretty funny. And then I don't know where this specific video comes from. There must have been a demo I'm not aware of, or maybe. Yeah, that was pretty crazy. That's from the company. Now, I don't know where this video comes from, if it's one of their videos or not, but look at all those little motors and stuff in there. Weird. We're creating a new race of slaves. Pretty awesome, huh? An API to the physical world. Does Neo want an API into the online world? Weird. Okay. So I'm going to go through some of these other things I have posted. So the Atlantic warns America is becoming post-literate as daily pleasure reading has fallen from 28% to 16%. And nearly 30% of adults now struggle to paraphrase or infer from a multi-page text. Damn. This guy's trying to say some racist shit. Show me the demographics of the 30%. I want to see something. I'm like, guy, show me the last book you read. Anyways. All right. Is this bad? This is from the Atlantic's article, The Age of Reading is Over. Not if I have anything to say about it. In 2024, in a national test, just 35% of high school seniors were proficient at skills such as analyzing complex fictional themes and evaluating the effectiveness of an author's argument. About the same number scored below basic, meaning that they may struggle to draw conclusions from concepts explicitly included in a text, or to use context clues to determine the meaning of an unknown word. And that'll come up later. Adult literacy scores have also dropped. Nearly 30% of American adults cannot paraphrase or make inferences from a multi-page text. In 2017, that number was less than 20%. Someone says, every teacher has these stories. But over the past 2 years, I have had multiple college students come into my office for help with reading, by which I mean they literally couldn't read the text I had assigned, and we had to go through it sentence by sentence. Do I want to do that one next? Yeah, I'll do this one next. Spencer Clavin says, and I agree with this, if present trends continue, they mark not the end of reading, but the end of mass literacy, turning books back into what they used to be, the special superweapon of a minority class whose mental powers, I propose, will outstrip those of the average mind as greatly and meaningfully in the post-literate era as in the pre-literate era. Well, we're in the post-literate era. Everybody's going with it, guys. That would mean the age of high-tech looks like the Middle Ages in this regard. If you recall from Collapse of the Money System we listened to the other night from Bernard, he said we'll descend back into the Dark Ages. Or at least that it looks the way we picture the Middle Ages, with a priestly caste wielding superior powers of focus, prediction, observation, and manipulation over a mentally reduced general public. Once again, the readers would be as gods among men. I'm not convinced that's inevitable, but whether it is or not, the best gift you can possibly give your kids right now is to steel them against the cognitive meltdown that's coming by shielding them against the phone barrage and teaching them what they can gain from attending in sustained love to great books. And, we just got a bunch of books in the mail for the kids. Katie had bought a couple different series. One of them I think was by Ursula K. Le Guin. I don't know if I'm saying it right. Le Guin. And she's a sci-fi writer. Really great book called The Lathe of Heaven that she wrote. I think she also wrote The Handmaid's Tale, if I'm not mistaken, but I've never read that. Maybe I should, though. It might be good. But The Lathe of Heaven's really good. I don't want to spoil it. You can look into it. When I say I don't want to spoil it, just so you know, that doesn't mean I'm thinking about you and like, oh, I don't want to spoil it for you. It's just more saying I don't want to talk about it. I just want to be clear, okay? When I say I don't want to spoil it, meaning when I say spoil, I'm just going to describe what's in the book. So I don't have the desire to sell you on that book, but you can go look it up. What was I saying? Oh yeah. So anyway, so she got I don't know how many, probably like 10, 15 new books for the kids. And there's a little set, and I don't know if it's the Ursula K. Le Guin ones or not, but it was like a set of 6 books. And Seneca read them all. Like I wasn't there for like 2 hours. I come back and like she'd already read them all, and she was already starting to read them again. And then she was already starting to draw pictures of the stuff in the book. And then she comes and starts telling me like the whole plot of the book. She's 7 and a half. Let's see. So that was a cool comment there. This person, actually, I want to come back to that. Let me move this. I'm going to move that here. The Atlantic's new cover story is absolutely definitive on the end of the age of reading in America and the emergence of a new post-literate age in modern life. Some core facts. Reading is shrinking. The share of Americans who read for pleasure declined by 43%. The thing is, reading for pleasure, I mean, there is like stuff you can read that's just absolute garbage, right? Like you can watch TV for pleasure, but you can also watch it to like watch documentaries or other things, like get information. You can look at the internet. You can do it for pure entertainment, or you can do it for understanding stuff. So reading generally is pleasurable if it's well written and if it's interesting. When I say interesting, I mean if it's making a point. And generally, your lack of interest comes from not understanding. But that doesn't mean that something can be poorly written and therefore not interesting or engaging. That's definitely like a point as well. But a lot of times, it's just not interesting because you can't understand or it doesn't seem relevant to you, right? But if you're interested in information, if you're interested in understanding things that seem like they wouldn't be interesting, if you have the vocabulary for it, will become interesting. Like my kids will read, like, you know, like those guidebooks with like plants and mushrooms and butterflies. Like they'll just read them, like they're manuals basically, but they just read it and they know what it's talking about. They can, like I've talked about this before, like they'll go out and they'll identify plants, they'll bring plants back. The other day I was working on, I had to take our washing machine apart. I haven't finished doing the process yet, but I had to take it apart because I need to replace like the bearing on the inside. So I have it all disassembled in the barn right now. And I asked Max, I was like, hey, can you make me something to drink? Because it's really hot in here. Because I don't have the air conditioning on in there. It's a big barn, and it's kind of crazy to air condition it unless I absolutely need to. But I just had all the doors open. You know, so it's a little bit warm in there. So I was like, hey, can you give me some like lemonade or something? So he comes back with like some kind of a lemonade thing he made with like sumac. There's like a red sumac that makes sort of like a lemonade type flavor. I think it had something else in it too. I forget. But it's like they understand different plants and different medicines and different, I mean, just as one example, right? So I'm saying something, usually that kind of a thing wouldn't be interesting to read. But for my kids, because they have a highly developed vocabulary, they'll read things that most people would not consider interesting, and they'll get a lot out of it and they can apply it. So it doesn't have to be that way, this way. Less than half of Americans read books anymore. The average sentence in a New York Times bestsellers are 1/3 shorter than a century ago. Wow, I didn't know that. Americans can swallow words and sentences, but they're losing the ability to think deeply about writing that's longer than an Instagram post. Nearly 30% of adults cannot paraphrase or make inferences from multi-page text. We read that. It's worse for the young. 4th and 8th grade reading scores have slid for the past decade. From 1984 to 2025, the percentage of 13-year-olds who said they rarely or never read for fun rose from 8 to 29%. Every year older a child gets, the less likely to read. Most high schoolers consider reading for pleasure an alien practice. Right? My kids are not high school age yet, but they only increase their desire to read over time. That's been our experience. Right? We have 3 kids. By asking them to read, she said, it's as if. Actually, let me go back. Margaret Rennick says some students review reading as an unnecessarily burdensome way of acquiring knowledge. By asking them to read, she said it's as if professors are arbitrarily withholding information from students by forcing them to get through this more difficult medium. And we'll come back to more about that Rennick's person in a bit. I'm just going to go through these real quick. This person says the situation is so much more desperate than you probably realize. University professors are saying they're now unable to teach history because reading long books and passages is how a person learns history. Their students are simply incapable of reading more than a few pages. Some classes don't assign any reading at all now, only lectures. There's an assumption among the people managing this decline that reading is just a way of receiving information. It isn't. Proper reading is how we build the mental muscle to synthesize ideas and evaluate them. If the catastrophic decline in reading and literacy is not addressed now, we risk losing everything. This is civilizational. Western civilization cannot survive the death of reading because it was built by people with the kind of cognitive depth that a culture of deep reading brings. Yeah. Someone says, this is why future generations of Americans will likely be divided between those who were raised on screens and those who were raised on books. Parents need to understand that the latter will govern and they effectively rule the former. Yeah, we need to get everybody reading. Okay, so I'm going to switch topics for a second, and I'll come back to this. But this is related. Polymarket says, Ivy League professor suspected AI cheating, ordered an in-person final, and saw average scores plummet from 96 to 48. And I have the article here. It's a Brown University professor. And I'll just show you the highlights real quick. But basically, he gave a midterm, and the students did way, like you can see the orange scores are the midterm scores, and they did really well on average. And he said, it says earlier in the article, the average generally, here it is right here. Oh no, that's not it. Historically, the average grade on the midterm was 65 to 80%, but this was a take-home test. They started doing take-homes in around COVID, and they just kept doing that. And this course was advertising take-home tests. So he got like 86 signups for the course when he would normally only get 30. Then when he saw the difference in the scores on the take-home midterm versus like historically when he's been teaching the class, when they weren't take-home tests, they were so much higher. So he was like, I think people are just cheating using AI or something. And then they ran it through AI to see like, if we give the AI a test, this test, what kind of answers does it come up with? And they're very similar to the answers that the students submitted. So he announced they were going to do an in-person final, and that if the scores on the final in person were similar to the scores on the midterm, they'd keep the midterm and it would all count for their grade. But if there was a big difference, then he was going to throw out the midterm and keep the final score for the final exam as more weighted in your final score. And he said like immediately like 30 people or 18 people subsequently dropped the class. 9 students remained enrolled but didn't even take the final exam. And then everybody else took it, I guess. 3 students got a 0. The average score was a 48.6%, by far a historic low. So think about that. It's the argument that the AI, it helps you learn. No, it just helps you cheat. It just makes it so you don't have to learn. And that doesn't mean there can't be specialized AIs that point you in the right direction of things of what you might study next, but it's just really so unnecessary. People were able to read and learn things before there was AI. Now, it wasn't universal, but that's not because there wasn't AI. It's because there wasn't universal high vocabulary. And the thing the AI is not going to do is give you that high vocabulary because it's built in the first 7 years of your life. It's based on your natural ability to learn and absorb and recognize patterns unconsciously. And once you're an adult and you're using your mind to learn, you're not accessing that natural ability to learn anymore, that unconscious ability. And so you end up just using whatever mind you've built on your base vocabulary. And so all the learning happens through the mind, which is very slow. It's not direct integration like it was when you were 0 to 7 or 0 to 5 or whatever it is now. it's kind of changing now. It's becoming that window's closing sooner and sooner now because of a lot of reasons, but a lot to do with the hyper informational environment. Ironically, it's like kind of ironic. It's having the opposite effect that you think it would. But also, there's a lot more people just putting their kids on TV or watching TV, iPads. It's become pretty extreme. So, anyways, he noticed this big difference. He went to the dean, and they're not really doing anything about it. So, I just wanted to show you that. Okay. Let's go back here, and then we'll get into the fun stuff, what I'm looking forward to. So, I want to show you some cool things. So, this is talking about that Atlantic article again. Features a Harvard student, who complained that he had to read a book written in, quote, Old English. Now, you might be thinking that he was assigned Beowulf or the Canterbury Tales. Yeah, shit that I read in high school, okay? So I don't know why they would even be complaining about that. Nope. This student was assigned A Clockwork Orange, which, if you were perceptive last night on the stream, I was wearing a Clockwork Orange t-shirt. Total coincidence. And he used ChatGPT to translate it. A Clockwork Orange was written in 1962, not 1692, which is still modern English, by the way. The student's grandparents were alive in the 60s. Is he also using a translation bot to speak to them? Well, that's a little bit sarcastic because I can understand the point of why it doesn't seem like normal English. So I was going to read a little bit of Clockwork Orange. We don't have to go crazy into it, but I wanted to show you some cool things. So I pulled up the text here. I read this in middle school, and I think I read it like at least 3-4 times. I really liked the book, and it wasn't so much the story that I liked, it was actually this part that the Harvard student in this article is complaining about. So I've got part 1 here. I'm just going to read through a little bit of it. I'll show you some cool examples, right? So here's the Old English that they're talking about, okay? So you got to understand it's written sort of like it's set in the future, I suppose. And now you wouldn't have this context all from the first chapter. I'm not going to read the whole thing. We'll just read a little bit. But having read the book, I understand the context, which is it's like in the future, young people, like teenagers, young people, they kind of like hang out in gangs, and they're really violent. And it's like they have no meaning or purpose in life. They just basically drink. They go to these bars where they drink this stuff, and it's like laced with drugs, and they go out and they're violent. They beat up homeless people. And the main character ends up going to prison because he kills somebody on one of these, what they call ultra violence. That's what they call it. They go do some ultra violence. It actually does sound a lot like today, that now that you're saying that, Owen. Like, yeah, actually, it's kind of funny. So anyways, he goes to jail. He goes to prison. They have a new program where they're going to test out this new way of trying to stop violence in the youth. They force him to watch violent films, and they give him a drug that makes him sick to his stomach. So he develops like an aversion to violence. So I'm spoiling a little bit, but there's a lot more to it. But the book's definitely worth reading. If anything, to challenge your ability to like focus and pay attention and consider things. And I want to show you an example. I also have a couple other books that I want to look at today. One of them is Fire in the Deep. We'll see if we get to this. I was looking for some passages to read. I don't know if I can find anything that does it justice to make my point, but without having to read a whole lot. But this is a really great book to challenge yourself with. I remember when I read it for the first time. Look, you can even see the dog ears. I don't know if you can see it. It probably doesn't show up on the camera, but there's a dog ear there. That's how I don't use bookmarks. I always like to dog ear my page and then close it. Sometimes they stay. Sometimes you can't find them anymore. Anyways, but this book is really cool. I think I might read the first chapter, the prologue, even though it doesn't really illustrate the point I'm getting at here. But I think this book does. Clockwork Orange. So I'm just going to read a little bit of it. What's it going to be then, eh? That was me. That is Alex, and my 3 droogs. That is Pete, Georgie, and Dim. Dim being really dim. And we sat in the Korova milk bar, making up our rasudoks, what to do with the evening. A flip, dark, chill winter, bastard, though dry. The Korova milk bar was a milk plus mesto, And you may, oh my brothers, have forgotten what these mestos were like. Things changing so scory these days, and everybody very quick to forget. Newspapers not being read much neither. Oh, interesting. Well, what they sold there was milk plus something else. They had no license for selling liquor, but there was no law yet against prodding some of the new vesches, which they used to put in the old Moloko. So you could peat it with Velocet, or Synthmesk, or Drincrom, or one or two other vesges, which would give you a nice, quiet horror show, 15 minutes, admiring Bog and all his holy angels and saints, in your left shoe with lights bursting all over your mozg. Or you could peat milk with knives in it, as we used to say, and this would sharpen you up and make you ready for a bit of dirty 20 to 1. And that was what we were peating this evening, I'm starting off the story with. Our pockets were full of deng, so there was no real need from the point of view of crasting any more pretty Polly to tolchok some old vec in an alley and viddy him swim in his blood, while we counted the takings and divided by 4, nor to do the ultra-violent on some shivering starry gray-haired petitza in a shop and go smecking off with the till's guts. But as they say, money isn't everything. The 4 of us were dressed in the height of fashion, which in those days was a pair of black, very tight tights with the old jelly mold, as we call it, fitting on the crotch underneath the tights. This being to protect and also a sort of a design you could viddy clear enough in a certain light. So that I had one in the shape of a spider. Pete had a rooker, a hand that is. Georgie had a very fancy one of a flower, and poor old Dim had a very hound and horny one of a clown's litso, face that is. So, let me see, I might want to read some more. It's actually really good. Dim not ever having much of an idea of things and being beyond all shadow of a doubting Thomas, the dimmest of we 4. Then we wore waisty jackets without lapels, but with these very big built-up shoulders, plechos we called them, which were a kind of a mockery of having real shoulders like that. Kind of sounds like the Looks Maxers. Then, my brothers, we had these off-white cravats, which looked like whipped-up kartoffel, or spud, with a sort of a design made on it with a fork. We wore our hair not too long, and we had flip horror show boots for kicking. What's it gonna be then, eh? Okay, so, obviously if you're just listening to me read it, maybe not the same, but when you're reading it for yourself and you can kind of slow down. But I remember reading this when I was a kid and being like, what the hell are they saying? And it really shows you that point of like, when you don't have certain vocabulary, you're like lost, right? But I made up my mind I wanted to read it. I don't know why I wanted to read the book so bad, but for some reason I did. And I don't remember how. I wish I could remember how I made this connection. Because, like, we had the internet back then. I probably read this in, like, if I had to guess, like 1997, 96, something like that. So the internet existed, but it wasn't like I was going on the internet. I didn't really have access to the internet when I was a kid. Not at home anyways. So it wasn't like I was going doing research. I don't know. Maybe I did some research on the internet. I don't know. But somehow I figured out, I don't remember how, that what they were doing is in this book is they're using like all this slang terminology. And I mean, that's obvious. But, and I don't know if it's 100% of it necessarily, but a lot of these words they're using are actually just Russian words, or they're like English versions of a Russian word, and it's like their version of slang. Now they might explain it somewhere, or maybe they explain it like in the introduction that I had, or maybe at the end or something. I don't really remember, but somehow I figured that out. I don't think it was just I realized it, like I must have looked at it somewhere. But then when I found that out, I was like, oh, that's really cool. I don't know why I thought it was cool, but I just thought it was really cool. So then I got a Russian dictionary, and I think I might have already been interested in Russian at the time. I can't really remember the timeline exactly, but I remember at one point being really interested in Russian, and I had gotten a Russian book that was like a Russian language lesson book. And I had like a Russian dictionary, and I also, I taught myself the Cyrillic alphabet, the Russian alphabet, and I could write it in print. I could also write it in cursive very fluently. And I learned like a little bit of Russian, and I was just really fascinated with this. So I don't know which one came first, but either way, it really got me, interested in figuring out what they were talking about. So like some of these words, for example, right? If you look here, the word milk in Russian is moloko. That's their letter for L, basically, right? Some of the letters in Russian look similar to the English letter. Some of them look totally different. Some of them look like totally the opposite. I'll show you an example. Here's the Russian alphabet. It's called Cyrillic. A lot of them look the same, but some of it's confusing. So like the B is actually their V. They say it like a V. That's their G. Looks like kind of like a line with a thing like that. Can't see my cursor, unfortunately. They have really weird letters like this second to last one here on the top row, J. Their I is this first one on the second row. It looks like a backwards in. And then the one next to it has sort of like a little accent mark. And I don't remember if that one actually has a sound to it or not. It might, but it's not Y as in like yeah. It's more Y as in like E. Like that kind of a sound, like sticky, that kind of a thing. And I think it's just dependent upon the context of the word, which one you would use. Their K looks normal. Their L looks kind of weird. They got an M. But then their N looks like an H. And then their R looks like a P, but their P looks like the Greek letter pi. Their S is a C. So like if you look like the word USSR, back when I was a kid, when I was in kindergarten at least, the USSR still existed. They call it CCCP, but it's actually CCCR. It's SSSR, actually. But it looks like to us CCCP. And some of these lists look Greek, like the F. It's like this line with a circle with a line through it, which is like the Greek letter phi, right? Here's the Greek alphabet. And if you notice gamma, it's the third one on the top row. If you look at it, the gamma looks just like the Russian G, right? Third row in the middle basically is phi, and you can see it looks just like their F, right? I'm trying to see if there's any other ones that are similar. The P looks the same. See, like the Greek, the second row at the end rather, that's pi, and it looks just like their P. I don't remember if there's any others that are similar. There might be. Oh yeah, like their R row, the third row, first letter there, it looks like a P, but it's actually R. So there's obviously some kind of evolution there between Greek and Russian. But and some of these are kind of confusing. Like if you look at that last row, it says the hard sign and the soft sign. They don't per se, they're not like letters that have a sound to them per se. They're more like grammatical additions to words, as far as I remember. I ended up studying 2 or 3 years. I can't remember now. No, 2 years. 2 years of Russian in university. I'll tell you a funny story. So when I was at the Air Force Academy first year, studying Russian, because I already had the background in learning the alphabet. So like day one, I already knew more than everybody there. It was pretty cool. So that wasn't hard for me to like already kind of get going. Unfortunately, I never took it seriously with any discipline. We had so many courses. I kind of like just lost interest in school by my second year. So I never really studied it to the point of mastery. But in like especially second year, I was just like not studying nothing. I was just winging it on tests and quizzes and not trying. Oh yeah, so my first year, our teacher was this American guy. He was an Army, I feel like he was like a helicopter pilot or something. But he was also a translator. And so, but he was American, but he spoke Russian. So he was our first year instructor, and he was pretty cool. And then I remember in the middle of the semester, at some point anyways, this guy comes in, this big, like, Russian-looking dude is all I can say, right? Like, bald head, big guy, and super deep voice, like, like talk like this, you know, like super deep, right? And our current teacher was like, this is going to be your teacher next year. His name's Lieutenant Kalinin. and he was from Russia. He was a lieutenant. He was actually was a lieutenant. I think he became a captain, but yeah, he started off as a first lieutenant when we met him in the American Air Force. So he was an Air Force officer in the U.S., but he was originally from Russia. He went to like Moscow State University. Anyways, for whatever reason, he was American now. And he introduced himself and started speaking to us. And it was funny because I remember my reaction was like, dude, this is first year Russian. We don't understand anything you're saying. Like, I was like thinking like, does he think that we're already fluent or something? Like, what's going on here? And after like a few minutes of him talking, it was like, what can I say? I'm trying to think of like an example. You know those magic eyes? Those 3D magic eye puzzles where you look at it, it doesn't look like anything, but if you know how to focus your eyes properly, you see like a 3D stereoscopic image, right? It was kind of like that because suddenly I realized he was speaking English to us. The whole time I was like, oh shit, he's actually just speaking English. But it was such a like deep, guttural, heavy accent that I thought he was speaking Russian at first. Anyways, side story. But they've also got this letter. It's the bottom one on the right. It's like a backwards R, but it's Ya. And if you look at that third row, there's like this whole series starting with Ts. It's like TS. Ts, Ch, Sh, and then Sh, Ch. All four in a row. And when you write them in cursive, like if you write Sh and Sh, Ch, and you put that with like the E, like the little backwards N thing, there's words that you can put where it just looks like a freaking Cy Twombly. You remember that? Cy Twombly. Remember the Cy Twombly scribbles? Yeah, it looks like this. This is like Russian cursive. Here's the. I remember seeing this before. The word is lishi. I don't know what that means, but I'm just pronouncing it. Lishi. And so you can break it up. I don't remember how the L looks. I guess that's how the L looks in cursive. It's been a long time. But look at this document. It's got to be a joke. That's insane. Wait, let's go back. Russian cursive photos. So blurry though. But you could write legibly like that. Doesn't look that much different than when you're writing English. But that's pretty insane. Okay, so anyways, going back to the point. Moloko. I don't know what vestiges is. I don't know if that's actually a Russian word. Maybe that's what he was trying to say. Vyesh. Thing, item, or object. Prodding for some of the new things which they used to put. Yeah, so that makes sense why he's saying it there. Into the old Moloko. Now, some of these are like made up words, like Velicet, Synthmesk, Drincrom, which kind of makes me think it's like adrenochrome, right? Like maybe that's what he's referring to. Or one or two other vestiges or things, which would give you a nice quiet horror show, 15 minutes admiring Bog and his... And like they're using the word Bog for God, which I think is pretty funny too, right? Yeah, I did finish the story, Sandra. It was just the point about the guy speaking English, but I thought he was speaking Russian. Maybe he missed that part, I don't know. But I'll tell you one of my favorite parts when I realized this, and now I realize, now that I think about it, I think it was coincidental that I started reading this book, and I was also studying Russian on my own. This was back when I was like in middle school, right? It might have been high school. No, it was middle school. And I think this is when it clicked that they were speaking Russian, because I was teaching myself a little Russian, like I was telling you. So I think maybe that's how I figured it out, because I don't remember having the internet or having any resources that told me. it just became obvious because I was like, oh, moloko, that's milk. I recognize that. That's why they're saying milk plus. Okay, it's like I made some connection. I think that's how it went. And what was I saying? Oh, this was the one that was so cool when I figured it out. And I don't know if I'm sure people have talked about this before. I just haven't looked into it to see if anyone ever figured it out. But I'm sure people have. I'm sure I'm not the only one who realized this. But this word right here, right? And I thought it was so cool the way they use this word horror show, which would give you a nice, quiet horror show, 15 minutes. And you would think, and that's why I thought it was really clever, because you would think the word means something bad, right? Horror show. Why are you saying a nice, quiet horror show? Is he being ironic? Like, what's going on there? But I just thought it was so clever how Anthony Burgess does this, because again, he's taking like these Russian words, turning them into slang. And it's obvious when some of them are Russian, like moloko. I mean, if you knew Russian, it'd be obvious, right? Mozg, I think, is brain. What the? Hold on a second. I think I just did it. Why is it not letting me copy it? I'll just have to do a search. Mozg. It's also a Polish word. Yeah, you see pictures of the brain, right? So, yeah, clearly it's brain. Mozg Army, Russian. In English, the brain of the army. The three volume military theory book. Interesting. So, yeah, I just thought that was really cool how he's doing that. Peat, you could peat milk with knives in it. I think that's the word for drink. This says drink means napitok, or is napitok, but it has the word peat in it right there, P-I-T. But I think that's maybe the verb. Yeah, see, here you go. Pitya. That's how you would say that. Pitya. I think.
Питье.
Pityo. Pityo. Drink. All right. So, okay. Anyways, belaboring the point perhaps. But this one's really cool. Horror show. Because that doesn't even look like a Russian word. Right? But if you look up, there we go. Let me see. There we go. Yeah. See, they're two forms of the same word. Horosho.
Хорошо.
Horosho. I was saying the wrong accent. Horosho.
Хорошо.
Is it slow? What's going on there? Let me do, what was it? Good? It's a little different. It's horoshi.
Хороший.
Horoshi, right? So I think what he's done there is he's taken the word horoshi or horosho and turned it into the word horror show, but it still means the same as it did in Russian, although it seems ironic because the word horror show you would think means something negative. So I just thought it was really cool because, you know, going back to this thing here, you have Harvard students complaining that it's too hard to read and they feel like it's some other language. And I'm like, you're not even trying. But it also shows like that starting point of, I'm just trying to get through this. I'm just trying to complete the assignment. I don't really care. Now, this was a book that I read outside of school. If this had been assigned to me in school, I probably would have been like, fuck this. Something about my attitude towards school was like, if they're telling me to do it, I don't want to do it. It's being told to me to do it. It's not coming from me in any way. But when I would find something that came from me, like I read 1984, it's got to be like 30 times. I'm not exaggerating, like a bunch, till it fell apart. A Clockwork Orange. I mean, I read a lot of stuff when I was growing up. I tried reading Dostoevsky, and there was a few things that I understood, but I didn't read a lot of Dostoevsky. My brother, for some reason, he was 2 years younger than me. He read a bunch of Dostoevsky. He really liked that book, Crime and Punishment. But I read a lot, but it was never because someone told me to read it. Like, except for in the case of 1984, there was a relative who suggested it to me. Actually, they bought me a copy and suggested it, and so I read that, and I really liked it. But, again, it wasn't in the context of school. There was very few things in school that I enjoyed. And I'll give you one example, is the book Don Quixote. Don Quixote. I remember we had to read it in school, in high school. This was probably my junior year, maybe senior year, actually. I can't remember. Maybe senior year? Because it would have been like world literature, I suppose. Let me see. Maybe junior year. Because in my school we did... Yeah, no, because British literature was junior year, and then world literature was my senior year. Pretty sure. So anyways, we read a bunch of stuff, like Gilgamesh, and I don't even remember what else. All I remember is Gilgamesh and Don Quixote. And I don't remember even reading a single sentence in the book. It's like we had this really thick literature book. Like, we had 2 volumes. They were like this thick. And it pretty much just lived in my locker. But it had like excerpts of stuff. And I don't understand the purpose of this. Like, why would they give us excerpts to read of something and then expect us to understand what the hell it's talking about and to understand all the context? So we would spend all this time learning about chivalry. And I'm like, what the fuck is chivalry? Like, it makes sense what you're saying, but it also doesn't make sense at the same time. Like, the way they explained it to us, it just didn't make sense. And they didn't give us I'm not trying to totally blame the school, but like, I definitely didn't have all the context for it. So it's like, now we're going to talk about chivalry, and it's like, why? What is the meaning of any of this, right? But so I'm kind of building up to this point of, so I didn't understand Don Quixote. I didn't try to read it. I remember them telling us about it. We had to read passages in class or something, and we talked about him fighting windmills or something, and I was like, okay, cool. But then maybe like, man, it must be like 2 years ago by now. I remember because it was probably when Caius was still like a really tiny kid, like a little baby. Because I would have been doing the bedtime, because Katie would have had Caius as a baby, and I would have been more the one doing the bedtime with both Max and Seneca at the same time. And I remember, I don't know why I got a copy of it or we had a copy, but I found a copy of Don Quixote. And I think this was, I could be wrong, but I think this was at the time that Katie was reading Count of Monte Cristo, although that might have been a different time. Because I remember really liking the movie. But anyways. So I read Don Quixote to the kids, and it's like, there's 2 books. It's like a part 1 and a part 2. And it was really good. Like, really good. It was really funny. And even though I still didn't have all the context, it's like they sort of give you a lot of the context in it. And basically the chivalry thing, it's like this guy, Don Quixote, was obsessed with knights of like the recent past in Spain and all of the chivalrous concepts and all this stuff. So I can understand why they were trying to explain that to us in school, but I didn't really understand how it related to the books. I didn't fucking read it. But reading it to the kids, it was like so good. Katie said it's terrible? Or, maybe, do you mean, I don't think she's referring to Don Quixote. I think she's probably talking about the one I just mentioned, which I already forgot. Count of Monte Cristo? Maybe that's what she's referring to. But anyways, it's really funny. Like, there's so many scenes where, honestly, if you've ever read, Monte Cristo is what she's talking about. So I guess she didn't like it. I never read it. I just liked the movie. But totally different story. Not literally different story, but, different thing is what I mean. It's a movie. I was trying to think what the point I was going to say is about... sorry, I'm reading the chat and getting distracted. I'm distracting myself with the chat. Don Quixote. If you haven't yet, I highly recommend to read the Dying Earth series by Jack Vance. It's really good. And if you're like me and you just really like... let me see if I can find something. Dying Earth, Jack Vance text. I don't know if I'll be able to get anything. Sorry, I got distracted by this. Well, well, well. What have we got here? What have we got here, my friends? I just randomly clicked on this. Songs of the Dying Earth. Stories in honor of Jack Vance. With stories by George R.R. Martin, Neil Gaiman, Tad Williams, Otherland, Dan Simmons of Hyperion, Ilium, etc., Olympus, all that. And man, I'm telling you, like, in Hyperion, they reference the Dying Earth, but it's never obviously a reference to Jack Vance, although it seems like maybe it's like an homage, but it's never really clear. Is he referencing this as sort of a reference to Jack Vance? Because there's like a poet who writes this series called Dying Earth, something like that. But now that I see Dan Simmons on this thing with Jack Vance, I'm like, okay, yeah, it was definitely a reference to that. All right. But anyways, Jack Vance, The Dying Earth PDF. Now, I don't prefer to read on a computer, but since I'm doing a stream, obviously I can. But I always read books, physical books. I like to have an actual physical book, even though it's inconvenient. And like the book I'm reading right now is a song called Youth by Jack Shirley. It's a trilogy, and it's like, it's got to be like 700 pages, maybe. I don't know. It's pretty thick. Maybe it's not quite that many. Maybe like 5, 6, something like that. And it's because it's 3 books in one. But it's like so annoying to hold it, and I'm like trying to hold it, and I lay in bed at night and I'm reading, and it's just like this big bulky thing. The last scientist struggles to create a new humanity in a race against the end of the world. Wow, they got like the actual 1969, copyright 1950. They're like stories, but one of the stories is really long. So it almost is like an entire book with a main character. But they're not, it's not all one continuous story. I'm trying to figure out which one is the one where they introduce. Yeah, see, these ones are not about the main guy, Kugel. They're all really good though. I'm just kind of scanning through it for a second. Dude, I need to read this again. It's so good. It's cool because it's sci-fi, I guess, but it reads almost like fantasy it's like fantasy setting, but with a sci-fi like it's a fantasy context with like a sci-fi thrust, if that makes sense. It's hard to explain because I really don't prefer reading fantasy. I don't really prefer reading about wizards and stuff like that, but as soon as you throw some sci-fi into it, some technology, or I don't know how, I don't even know really why it would be considered sci-fi at all, but maybe it's just a style thing. I'm not really sure. I'm just looking for something. The Deodand. Damn, I forgot about all this. Lane, the Wayfarer. I'm just looking for... I forgot that there was like a bunch of stories up front. And then there's like this main story that's quite... Or at least I think it's like a big long one. I don't remember. It's already 100 pages in and I haven't even seen Kugel yet. Maybe I just liked that part so much I assumed the whole thing was about it. And I just forgot about all the other parts. Yeah. Wow. Hold on, I'm just looking for something specific here real quick. Wow, it's like I totally forgot that there's all these other stories at the beginning. Wait, what? The end? I wonder if... Am I missing something, Katie? Yeah, it's one of the sagas. The third Dying Earth novel. The third book in the Dying Earth series. Okay, I think probably what it is I probably have a book that has all the novels in it. I think that's what it is. I think it's called Tales from the Dying Earth. Or is that what this one was called? No, this is called The Dying Earth. So I think what I have is a book that has all of them in it. I think that's what it is. So I was getting confused. So there's the first book which has a bunch of different stories, and then the second one which is like one big long story, and then the third one which has more stories. I think that's why I was getting confused. So I think this is just like the first book maybe. But it's just like the writing style is so good. And all of his books are like that. He's kind of an underrated author. Turjan sat in his workroom, legs sprawled out from the stool, back against, and elbows on the bench. Across the room was a cage. Into this, Turjan gazed with rueful vexation. The creature in the cage returned the scrutiny with emotions beyond conjecture. It was a thing to arouse pity. A great head on a small, spindly body, with weak, rheumy eyes and a flabby button of a nose. The mouth hung slackly wet, the skin glistened waxy pink. In spite of its manifest imperfection, it was to date the most successful product of Turjan's vats. Turjan stood up, found a bowl of pap. With a long-handled spoon, he held food to the creature's mouth. But the mouth refused the spoon, and mush trickled down the glazed skin to fall on the rickety frame. Turjan put down the bowl, stood back, and slowly returned to his stool. For a week now it had refused to eat. Did the idiotic visage conceal perception, a will to extinction? As Turjan watched, the white-blue eyes closed, the great head slumped and bumped to the floor of the cage. The limbs relaxed. The creature was dead. It's just really well written. It's one of those things similar to, what is it? A Canticle for Leibowitz. Just like the way it's written, the style of it. It's just really well written, and it's like really enjoyable to read. Maybe not to hear me read it out loud, but when you're reading it for yourself, it's just like really, it flows so nicely. Okay, so but there was a kind of a bigger point I wanted to make, which was just this point about this Harvard student, for example, who's like, oh, it's too hard to read this. I can't understand it. We need to get the information. Why? Because they need to write the term paper or write the essay or whatever and get the grade. Because it's just about, I went to Harvard so I can get a good job. But if anything, it's just indicating the level of reading ability has gone down so much, or it's just not there. Because if you can't read this, you're not going to be able to read really anything. Like anything worth reading. You're not going to be able to read, like I pulled up William Gibson's Neuromancer, which apparently they're making a Netflix series about it. Whoopee. Read the book. Read the book. I've said this probably a few times too many already, but I remember the first time I read this book. And I think it was a combination of reading it right at bedtime when I'm tired and maybe kind of like dozing off here and there and just like missing context or something. But this was a book for some reason, and it was kind of when I got back into reading sci-fi. I read a lot when I was a kid, and there was a long period of time where I didn't read a lot of science fiction. I read a lot of other stuff, but I wasn't reading science fiction very much for like a period of maybe like, I don't know, 5 or 6 years or something, who knows. But then I got back into it, and I started looking into like what are recommended things to read. And one of the first things I got, I think I read Stranger in a Strange Land, and I really liked that. And then I think I don't remember what else I read at that time, but I read, or what exactly I read at that time, I mean. Oh yeah, we had read like Snow Crash, Cryptonomicon, Diamond Age. These are all Neil Stephenson books. And some Heinlein. I had read that book, Altered Carbon by Richard Morgan, which is I definitely recommended. That's on my recommended book list. But then I decided to read Neuromancer just because I'd always heard the name Neuromancer, and it sounds weird. Like I always assumed it was like more of like a fantasy book, if that makes sense. Not that I assumed it was literally fantasy, but just the word Neuromancer sounded to me like cryptomancer or something, like something about like the undead, or that was my association with the word, was just that it had something to do with that, so I was just never really interested in it. And then I found out like, oh, he's the guy who basically coined the term cyberspace and the Matrix, and I was like, oh, really? That's interesting. So then I wanted to read it. But I had trouble with it. Like, it's not that I had trouble like just reading the words, but it didn't really all make sense. Just the whole picture of what was going on. And part of it is, and it's funny because I started reading it again recently, but then I kind of got distracted because I had some other books I wanted to read, so I put it to the side. But I read a few chapters because I was like, is it really that hard to understand? And I read the first few chapters and I was like, this doesn't seem very hard to understand. I don't know what my problem was before, but maybe it was just part of my process in redeveloping my reading ability. But I remember there's one scene in here. Let me see if I can find it. There was like an action scene. I wanted to read that. See if I can find it. His tail was back. He was sure of it. Okay, so it's probably going to be... It's not that one. But I think I should read that section because it's not the point I was looking for, but it's just his writing style is so cool. I always kind of describe it as like you're reading like an action sequence, sort of. All right, I'll just read this part. So you won't have context for it, but I think the beginning part of the book, it's not like that it's boring, but just maybe in terms of sitting here on the stream and reading out loud, it's more just like building up context. But this will be more interesting perhaps in terms of getting the style. His tail was back. He was sure of it. He felt a stab of elation. Oh, wait. Hold on. One second. Oh, yeah. And there's like an AI. Oh, that's weird. Sorry, I had a little bit of a mind glitch there. Not really, but um, I found this soundtrack that somebody made for Neuromancer, so I was going to play it while I read it. It just sounded pretty cool. But I was looking through the playlist, and one of the tracks is called Wintermute. And then I remembered, oh yeah, that's the name of like the AI. I'm pretty sure it's the name of the AI in the story. It's like this, it's part of the story, but it's like this big AI thing called Wintermute. And then I remembered, like, you know, we don't play a lot of video games, but every once in a while we'll play games, and we have like a Steam account, which we've downloaded a few games on there, but my Steam account name is Wintermute. I was like, but I swear it's just like they assigned it to me at random. I don't remember, but maybe not. Maybe I called it that. I just don't have any recollection of that. And I was like, wait, that's a weird coincidence that my account would be called Wintermute. But even though it was assigned at random. But maybe it wasn't. Maybe I just actually called it that. All right. Let's see. Molly and Case. I was looking to see if there's any cool ones on here. I haven't really listened. I just listened to the first part, but it was for like the opening track. So I wonder if this sounds any good. Sounds kind of cool. Turn it down a little bit. I don't use a Kindle. I see the chat. No, I do not use a Kindle. I mean, you can use a Kindle if you want to, I suppose, but I don't. His tail was back. He was sure of it. He felt a stab of elation, the octagons and adrenaline mingling with something else. You're enjoying this, he thought. You're crazy. Because in some weird and very approximate way, it was like a run in the Matrix. Get just wasted enough, find yourself in some desperate but strangely arbitrary kind of trouble, and it was possible to see Ninsei as a field of data. The way the Matrix had once reminded him of proteins linking to distinguish cell specialities. Then you could throw yourself into a high-speed drift and skid, totally engaged but set apart from it all. And all around you, the dance of biz, the information interacting. Data made flesh in the mazes of the black market. Go it, Case, he told himself. Suck 'em in. The last thing they'll expect. He was half a block from the games arcade where he'd first met Linda Lee. He bolted across Ninsei, scattering a pack of strolling sailors. One of them screamed after him in Spanish. Then he was through the entrance, the sound crashing over him like surf. Subsonics throbbing in the pit of his stomach. Someone scored a 10 megaton hit on Tank War Europa. A simulated airburst drowning the arcade in white sound as a lurid hologram fireball mushroomed overhead. He cut to the right and loped up a flight of unpainted chipboard stairs. He'd come here once with Wage to discuss a deal in prescribed hormonal triggers with a man called Matsuga. He remembered the hallway. Its stained matting, the row of identical doors leading to tiny office cubicles. One door was open now. A Japanese girl in a sleeveless black t-shirt glanced up from a white terminal. Behind her head, a travel poster of Greece, a GM blue splashed with streamlined ideograms. Get your security up here, Case told her. Then he sprinted down the corridor out of her sight. The last two doors were closed and he assumed locked. He spun and slammed the sole of his nylon running shoe into the blue lacquered composition door at the far end. It popped, cheap hardware falling from the splintered frame. Darkness there, the white curve of a terminal housing. Then he was on the door to its right, both hands around the transparent plastic knob, leaning in with everything he had. Something snapped and he was inside. This was where he and Wage had met with Matsuga, but whatever front company Matsuga had operated was long gone. No terminal, nothing. Light from the alley behind the arcade filtering in through soot-blown plastic. He made out a snake-like loop of fiber optics protruding from a wall socket, a pile of discarded food containers, and the bladeless nacelle of an electric fan. The window was a single pane of cheap plastic. He shrugged out of his jacket, bundled it around his right hand, and punched. It split, requiring 2 more blows to free it from the frame. Over the muted chaos of the games, an alarm began to cycle, triggered either by the broken window or by the girl at the head of the corridor. Case turned, pulled his jacket on, and flicked the Cobra to full extension. With the door closed, he was counting on his tail to assume he'd gone through the one he'd kicked half off its hinges. The Cobra's bronze pyramid began to bob gently, the spring steel shaft amplifying this pulse. Nothing happened. There was only the surging of the alarm, the crashing of the games, his heart hammering. When the fear came, it was like some half-forgotten friend. Not the cold, rapid mechanism of the Dex paranoia, but simple animal fear. He'd lived for so long on a constant edge of anxiety that he'd almost forgotten what real fear was. This cubicle was the sort of place where people died. He might die here. They might have guns. A crash from the far end of the corridor. A man's voice shouting something in Japanese. A scream, shrill terror, another crash. And footsteps, unhurried, coming closer. Passing his closed door. Pausing for the space of 3 rapid beats of his heart and returning. 1, 2, 3. A boot heel scraping the matting. The last of his octagon-induced bravado collapsed. He snapped the cobra into its handle and scrambled for the window. Blind with fear, his nerves screaming, he was up, out, and falling, all before he was conscious of what he'd done. The impact with pavement drove dull rods of pain through his shins. A narrow wedge of light from a half-open service hatch framed a heap of discarded fiber optics and the chassis of a junked console. He'd fallen face forward on a slab of soggy chipboard. He rolled over into the shadow of the console. The cubicle's window was a square of faint light. The alarm still oscillated, louder here, the rear wall dulling the roar of the games. It's like part of it is when you're reading something, it doesn't always make sense at first. Like if you've read Dune, it doesn't make sense when you're reading in the beginning, even though they're literally telling you everything that's going to happen in the very beginning of the book. It's like you're like, what's going on? You almost feel the confusion of the characters not really understanding what's happening. And that's just part of being able to read. But if you can read effectively, you get through it and you start building more context and you start to understand more and it starts to make sense, right? And I guess I'm just looking at the point of we've become very like, no, I just want it now, right now, tell me the information. But you're missing so much substance if you do that. You know? It's like if you go out to a restaurant with your friends and you're hanging out and you're having a great time, you know, and you're eating some good food versus like, no, just put the flavor of the steak in a pill. I'll take the pill while I'm sitting on the toilet. You know, like I just want the flavor now. That's all I need. I don't need all the extra parts. And it's like, no, the extra parts is part of it. It's actually part of what makes it enjoyable, right? And like, think about it. If our literacy level goes down, we don't even really, like writers and authors, they'll have no purpose. It's like we don't need any humans involved. The AI can give me a summary. I don't need a human to even exist. It'll just give me the information that I need. Like why? Because I need to just use that so I can, you know, make some money or just survive or whatever. It's like even the little bit of substance that's like the extra part that comes within reading a good book, it's like all that's just becoming irrelevant now. It's really sad. It's really sad. But if you're in our group, if you're in our friend group, then it's not acceptable to not read. All right, I'm going to read a little bit of this one too. This is from Fire Upon the Deep. I'm just going to read the prologue because it's just really cool. You just get really cool ideas and information, and then you see other ways you can express yourself. This is the prologue. Werner Vinge, A Fire Upon the Deep. I highly recommend this book. I also recommend his other books. I've read Rainbow's End. That was really good. But this one, this is top notch. How to explain. How to describe. Even the omniscient viewpoint quails. A singleton star, reddish and dim. A ragtag of asteroids and a single planet, more like a moon. In this era, the star hung near the galactic plane just beyond the beyond, which is in caps. Beyond the beyond. The structures on the surface were gone from normal view, pulverized into regolith across a span of eons. The treasure was far underground, beneath a network of passages, in a single room filled with black. Information at the quantum density, undamaged. Maybe 5 billion years had passed since the archive was lost to the nets. See, already it's like, oh, wow, 5 billion years? Like, but this information system exists? Like, oh, tell me more. Like, what's this? The Curse of the Mummy's Tomb, the comic image from mankind's own prehistory lost before time. They had laughed when they said it, laughed with joy at the treasure, and determined to be cautious just the same. They would live here a year or 5, the little company from Strom, the archaeologist programmers, their families and schools. A year or 5 would be enough to hand-make the protocols, to skim the top and identify the treasure's origin in time and space, to learn a secret or two that would make Stromley Realm rich. And when they were done, they would sell the location, perhaps build a network link, but chancier that, this was beyond the beyond. Who knew what power might grab what they'd found? And it capitalized the word power. So now there was a tiny settlement, and they called it the High Lab. It was really just humans playing with an old library. It should be safe, using their own automation, clean and benign. This library wasn't a living creature, or even possessed of automation, which here might mean something more, far more, than human. They would look and pick and choose and be careful not to be burned, humans starting fires and playing with the flames. The archive informed the automation. Data structures were built, recipes followed. A local network was built, faster than anything on Strom, but surely safe. Nodes were added, modified by other recipes. The archive was a friendly place, with hierarchies of translation keys that led them along. Strom itself would be famous for this. 6 months passed, a year. The omniscient view. Not self-aware, really. Self-awareness is much overrated. Most automation works far better as part of a whole, and even if human powerful, it does not need to self-know. But the local net at the High Lab had transcended, almost without the humans realizing. The processes that circulated through its nodes were complex, beyond anything that could live on the computers the humans had brought. Those feeble devices were now simply front ends to the devices the recipes suggested. The processes had the potential for self-awareness, and occasionally the need. We should not be talking like this, talking at all. The link between them was a thread, barely more than the narrowness that connects one human to another. But it was one way to escape the overness of the local net, and it forced separate consciousness upon them. They drifted from node to node, looked out from cameras mounted on the landing field. An armed frigate and an empty container vessel were all that sat there. It had been 6 months since resupply. A safety precaution early suggested by the archive, a ruse to enable the trap, and they capitalized the word trap. Flitting. We are wildlife that must not be noticed by the overness, by the power that soon will be. On some nodes they shrank to smallness and almost remembered humanity, became echoes. Poor humans, they will all die. Poor us, we will not. I think they suspect. Sienna and Arnie, anyway. Once upon a time, we were copies of those two. Once upon a time, just weeks ago, when the archaeologists started the ego-level programs. Of course they suspect. What can they do? But what can they do? It's an old evil they've wakened. Till it's ready, it will feed them lies on every camera and every message from home. Thought ceased for a moment as a shadow passed across the nodes they used. The overness was already greater than anything human, greater than anything humans could imagine. Even its shadow was something more than human, a god trolling for nuisance wildlife. Then the ghosts were back, looking out upon the schoolyard underground. So confident the humans, the little village they had made there. Still, thought the hopeful one, the one who had always looked for the craziest outs, we should not be. The evil should long ago have found us. The evil is young, barely 3 days old. Still, we exist. It proves something. The humans found more than a great evil in this archive. Perhaps they found the two. Or an antidote. Whatever else, the overness was missing some things and misinterpreting others. While we exist, when we exist, we should do what we can. The ghost spread itself across a dozen workstations and showed its companion a view down an old tunnel far from human artifacts. For 5 billion years it had been abandoned, airless, lightless. 2 humans stood in the dark there, helmets touching. See, Sienna and Arnie conspire. So can we. The other didn't answer in words. Glumness. So the humans conspired, hiding in darkness they thought unwatched. But everything they said was surely tattled back to the overness, if only by the dust at their feet. I know, yet you and I exist. then that should be impossible too. Perhaps altogether, we can make a greater impossibility come true. Perhaps we can hurt the evil newly born here. A wish and a decision. The two misted their consciousness across the local net, faded to the faintest color of awareness, and eventually there was a plan, a deception. Worthless unless they could separately get word to the outside. Was there time still for that? And that's not even the end of the prologue. But man, it's like every time I read one of these, I'm like, I should read this again. But then I got so many other things I want to read. It's a good problem to have, though. All right. Well, that was fun. I just wanted to give you guys a little taste of some of those things and just kind of make the point that don't buy into this post-literate bullshit, man. There is a definitive value in developing the skill to read because there's so much that's been written down. And if you're just looking for the summary and you're just trying to complete the assignment, you're not really considering, you're not really like looking at the points and understanding. There's just something that's being missed. And it's hard to put into words, actually, like what that is. I mean, I'm sure it could be put into words, but it doesn't quite, you know, I don't want to be crass, but it's kind of like watching porn versus actually having sex. It's kind of like that. It's like, yeah, it's not really the same. Not at all. It's ineffable. Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. I can't really explain it. Maybe it is possible. I'm sure someone has broken down exactly all the different things that are happening when you actually deeply read something and all that, but it's kind of like I don't really find that very persuasive. It's kind of like you can explain what it's like to eat a delicious steak, but if you actually eat it, you're like, oh, shit. Yeah, okay. But there's more to it than just the experiential aspect. You're developing an ability to like draw out information and form conclusions from context and put things together, which is I don't know if it's a skill per se, but it's definitely a function of a high vocabulary and a lot of practice reading a lot of challenging things. So I guess you could call it a skill. But again, like so much of what's happening right now with a lot of the tech companies is these people reading these sci-fi stories. So that's one of the reasons why I keep, suggesting and pushing this point of like, read these stories so you can see what I see. Because they read them too. And they're trying to bring them to life. Let me see if there's a couple. I'll show a couple more random things real quick. Let me pull them up. Just a few more little quick notes. Okay, I'll just show you these real quick and then we'll end for tonight. Florida's rolling out AI-powered cameras on its garbage trucks to scan properties for code violations, unpermitted renovations, and other issues. That is fucked, dude. After installing flock cameras on poles, the city, now it says Florida, but there must be a city in Florida. The city is now adding mobile surveillance from trash trucks to monitor homes and yards. Does it say where this is? Yeah, I'm not saying where exactly it is, so.
Very interesting things that we are exploring right now with AI. Code has already looked at a software that will put cameras on trash trucks that drive up and down every single street. And that software has the ability to identify bad roofs, broken windows. We could easily, if we deploy this, we could look at saying, tell us when there's construction material at the curb. Because if someone's got an entire tub and a kitchen at their curb, it's likely they're doing a remodel that needs a permit. So we're not there yet. We've demoed it and we've looked at it. The issue then becomes, well, what if we get 3,000 of them a week? then we don't even have a manpower issue to resolve. So we're exploring how and to best deploy it, figuring out what the costs are. But there are some very unique and innovative AI software tools that are coming out to help code with some of these issues.
What about like heftier fines on the people that are cut?
Cape Coral. Interesting, man. Like, dude, does this guy want to live in that world? Like, maybe. Well, whether you like it or
Very
not, you're going to be held
interesting.
accountable for everything. Flock cameras capture woman. Okay, I'll just let this person talk.
Just got a $1,250 ticket in the mail for having my phone on my lap, face down, and both hands on the steering wheel. Pretty cool. Just got a $1,200.
Wow. She had her phone face down on her lap. They're saying this video is fake. Yeah, I actually, it's funny. I just noticed that right before I scrolled down because it said, I saw, where was it? I just saw this. What made me think about Australia? Oh, because it said Queensland right there. It said Queensland, and I was like, Queensland, is that? You know, like literally the thought of Australia came up. I'm like, is there a place called Queensland around here? Somewhere in America? Yeah, I don't know. But that doesn't mean it's necessarily Australia. It does say Queensland. So it could be a fake video. Alexandra Parade, Queensland, yeah. So it sounds like it's bullshit. We caught it, guys. We got the bullshit. Yeah, I know. That's what's weird. She has an American accent anyways, so. Just maybe just rage bait, clickbait. But this is interesting. EU Parliament advances Chat Control 1.0, allowing mass scanning of private communications through 2028. So I don't know what that literally means, other than they'll be able to read all your text messages with AI. Scanning of private communications. EU Parliament. Damn. That's like a lot of countries affected. Wow. Okay, well, it's 10 o'clock my time. I'm going to leave it at that, guys. I'll see y'all tomorrow night. Same time, same place. Have a good night. Go read something tonight. Pick out a good book. If you haven't read Fire Upon the Deep, read it. If you haven't read Neuromancer, read it. A Clockwork Orange is great as well. All right. Let me know tomorrow what you guys are reading. Maybe we can talk about that. And I'll see y'all tomorrow. Have a good night.